Welcome to the Accounting Life podcast with Jotham Tai. Today's episode is part 2, AI Deep Dive. We are once again joined by guest Jason Pikoos, Managing Partner of Client Experience at Connor Group. On this episode, we discuss the various forms of AI, how companies are accessing the technology, as well as common myths around this exciting field. Now, our host, Jotham Tai.
Hey, Jason, welcome back to the Accounting Life podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good to be back. It's always a fun, fun exercise to go through the discussions with you. So I'm excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to kick off this second part of a 3 episode series to talk about AI. And gosh, Jason, since we last connected, it wasn't that long ago. Seems like there are many more new developments in the world of AI. I know the first episode we talked about how teams can assess the readiness for leveraging AI technology. And for this episode, hoping to drill down and, maybe talk about the different forms of AI that are available for these organizations. And really to just start this at the broadest level possible, what would you say are the different forms of AI and how do they work? I know there's a lot of terminologies being thrown around, AI, Gen AI, machine learning, but, how would you describe that lay of the land?
Yeah, and that's great. It's a good question. And I think the word AI it's used a lot. Sometimes it's really is describing artificial intelligence, and other times it's just describing a smart piece of technology. So it's good to understand what AI really is, but I think it's helpful to understand the forms of AI. When we look at AI, we look at it in 2 very broad buckets. There's the generative AI or Gen AI, using the abbreviation. I think that's the one that most people are referring to when they say AI. And the most common form of that is obviously ChatGPT from OpenAI. But generative AI, as the name implies, it's taking information from today as well as maybe prompts or questions or additional data, and it's creating or generating new content. We see it used in 2 primary methods. One of them, which is probably the most common one, is you give it a short prompt, such as, hey, I go into ChatGPT and ask it to plan a trip for me to Spain or write an accounting policy, and it gives me a very detailed response, right? So it takes my question about a trip to Spain or a policy, and it writes a very long document, which I can then engage with to adjust or correct or build out. The second form, which actually we see more commonly embedded in AI applications, is I give the AI a huge amount of information and I ask it to pull insights out of it. So it can give it a revenue contract offer, a summary or specific terms or pricing details. We are seeing certain tools where they're taking tons of information from a financial system and then giving you maybe a flux analysis. So the idea being is that it takes an enormous amount of information and synthesizes it into the specific output. That is a very, very powerful use case because of the fact that it really saves finance and accounting teams a heck of a lot of time by maybe saving them from reading a 50-page contract. So that's typical generative AI use. Very popular. I think people are very excited. It's a really, really new capability that's only emerged in the last couple of years. The second form of AI, which is actually not new at all, is machine learning. This has been around for decades. It's effectively using sophisticated models to analyze enormous amounts of data and predict outcomes or identify potentially anomalies in the data. And that can be used for many reasons. Some people use it for fraud detection, but you can also use it for, recommending upsell opportunities to customers. So you look at your customer history, determine that customers that follow this chain of behavior will typically then maybe buy this additional product, or it could be something else that may be at risk of leaving. So machine learning is a very, very powerful use case. What's super interesting, although it's been around for decades, and actually many companies have both the technology and actually use it internally, finance and accounting teams very rarely use it, even though it actually has some really interesting use cases across finance and accounting. So that's how we typically look at generative AI, the new, modern, cool, exciting stuff. Machine learning, frankly, more traditional form, been around for a while, leverages what I would think of as more traditional technology, may have uses depending on the kind of the company type and what you're looking for.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple examples. I'd like to highlight one from each bucket there. For Gen AI, you mentioned accounting policies. Yep. It generates a policy based on prompts, so the definition is very clear there. And to your point, machine learning, that form has been in existence for a while. I know we have some friends in the close management space that have transaction matching.
Yep.
That's more machine learning oriented. And even, I'm going to age myself, Jason. Back in 1999, when I was in college, I worked at a major bank, Wells Fargo, when I was in college, in their fraud department. You mentioned fraud earlier. And they already had some kind of algorithm to detect that people that steal credit cards go to the gas station first to test it out. And then they go to Best Buy after and buy a big TV. So that was, already in place back then. And I think it's a great way to start the conversation, because a lot of us that are new to AI are seeing this as like a brand new world. But I think it's important to recognize that there are forms of it that have already been in existence for a while. So yeah, I love how we started the conversation there.
Spot on. I mean, I think ChatGPT, because it was so user accessible, made this technology, created awareness of this technology to a degree that it's never been before, and therefore opened the door to with the many ways it could be used. But much of this technology has been there for some time. Even generative AI, I think many people think of it as, it's only been around for about a year or so. The reality is generative AI forms have been around even for several years, certainly not as long as machine learning.
Absolutely. And that's actually a great segue to my next question. So you mentioned ChatGPT made it really widely available back a couple of Decembers ago. But, for some, maybe in a business setting, they're not sure how to get access to this type of AI technology, whether it's generative or machine learning. So, through your experiences and through your networks, how are people finding ways to access this technology?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, we're certainly seeing these type of, call it this user type of technologies such as ChatGPT, and people are finding ways to bring those very simplistic capabilities to bear. Interestingly enough, although it's quite a simple piece of technology, it actually has many, many, many use cases. And I think we're seeing a lot of finance and accounting teams, and frankly, organizations across, functions across an organization, bringing those technologies because they drive just some very basic day-to-day efficiencies. But outside of that type of chat interface application, what we're seeing is three forms of AI that I expect that are coming out, and I expect will continue to evolve this way. The first, and I think this is the most rapidly deployed form, was the standalone AI. That was basically a piece of software built directly around AI with a specific purpose or specific purposes. So a purpose-built standalone AI application. They were very quick to stand them up because they were able to architect their technology directly around the capabilities of AI. And we saw a few of those pop up fairly quickly. Very powerful, but very focused in their use case. So if you have the use case, very, very exciting. Some, depending on how, the nature of the use of the application and size of company, can also be relatively expensive. The second form, which is also being deployed, actually was, a close second, and I think we'll see more and more of this coming out, is the embedded AI. Many companies, finance and accounting, probably have 10, 15 accounting technologies. It could be Gapify, it could be close management, it could be an ERP. What we're seeing is these software providers are now bringing AI to life within their applications. That tends to be a little bit, they came out second to the standalone apps because effectively you're taking a new piece of technology and finding a way to meaningfully work it into your application. And in most cases, what we've seen were, there were certainly a few providers that just launched the stuff immediately. But I think in the finance and accounting space, especially given that accountants like actual use cases, I think most companies have been a little more thoughtful about AI is cool and everything, and we don't want to just launch AI because we're launching AI. We want to be thoughtful that this is actually going to add value, right? So it's not just about getting our name in the press, but actually adding value. Now you're adding a piece of technology in a pre-built tech stack. So I think that has been taken a little longer to make sure that we find both a meaningful use case and get it to work within the existing technology stack. The benefits of the embedded app, well, in many cases, companies already have it. It expands and extends the value of that application itself, giving you new capabilities, and oftentimes it's actually relatively inexpensive. My expectation is, yes, they may be charging for it, especially as they add features, and additional features and functions with AI, but it probably will be less expensive than a standalone AI application that may achieve a similar outcome. It's also valuable because it's all within the same environment, so a little bit less technology proliferation. The third version, which we're expecting, but we haven't actually seen many players in this space, and it's interesting to know what it will look like, is what might be think of as an AI platform. a piece of technology that offers many, many different AI capabilities and use cases, all in a single, call it interface that users can define for their own purposes. There are pieces of it popping out. I've seen certain, what I would think of standalone apps referring to themselves as a platform because they have multi-use cases, but multi-use cases is not the same as an open platform where I can do almost whatever I want. And I can really define it in the way. So you've got data AI platforms that work well with data. You've got transaction ones, you've got document ones. There's a lot of them popping up, but we haven't actually seen a true AI platform. Whether those AI platform comes along standalone, or there are automation platforms already out there, whether they will add true platform AI capabilities within them will be interesting to see. But I think that's actually probably the third iteration, which will allow companies to put a lot of AI in a single place. I think a lot of people are concerned with the AI that the proliferation of applications that occurred in the SaaS world, we moved into SaaS and everybody bought best of breed, and now we've got a lot of things plugging in. That's going to get worse in the case of AI. Well, I want X plus I need Y and Z AI applications so that they all work together. So I think that's where the AI platform can be quite compelling. It's going to be expensive because it's multi-use, multi-purpose, probably more difficult to implement because you actually have to define your own use cases, but it'll put everything in one place, which will make it a lot easier. And I think that's actually probably where you get long-term value when you have lots of data and lots of use cases. Then you can actually have kind of this overarching AI capability that can actually, I guess, draw value from those many applications.
Wow. And that last form there, and I'll recap all three in a second, but that last form there is really exciting to think about. You know, obviously for players like us at Gapify, we're thinking about it from an embedded perspective because for a lot of accountants that we partner with, just getting that start. And if it's seamless, requires less to get stood up, and you can demonstrate value to your point. With adding these capabilities and not just adding .ai to your domain.
The cool little logo.
Right. For folks like me who, I started my AI journey about a year ago. I feel like there's still a lot that I'm learning, although my use of it has become very prominent now in my day to day. But embedded seems like a good, I know I have I'm a little biased here because that's the direction we're going as Gapify, but it sounds like a good way to start. Would you find that to be true, or do you think standalone and multi-use AI for accountants are compelling as well?
I think the embedded is going to be the easy route because it will be an application that companies are already using. It'll be a simple introduction. I think there will be a degree of comfort that comes with an embedded application. Hey, I'm already a user of Gapify. I'm comfortable with the application. I infer, therefore, that comfort to the technology, even if it extends into the AI space. We still do encourage people, no matter what AI you adopt, is make sure that you vetted how that AI works so you're comfortable with it. Because just because it sits within a well-controlled application doesn't mean that the AI component is well-controlled. But I think we will probably see the fastest, they said the first players were the standalone. I think we'll see the fastest proliferation, there you go, proliferation of AI through the embedded, because it'll be a very easy way to adopt it, or to be honest, in some respects, ignore it. I guess that is not our common use case with accountants, get new technology and maybe not use it. But I think the embedded will be probably, we see it a lot. And I think I said we'll see them starting with some basic use cases. And as these software providers figure out how to connect this AI capability with their technology, I think we'll start seeing it move faster and faster, because they will start not only adding AI capabilities, but they're asking themselves, how do we architect our system better go forward so that it works natively better with AI? That's the piece that they have to do. You're kind of doing a retrofit right now. Okay, we've got this great technology, but how does it retrofit to what we've built? Go forward, we'll probably start seeing them evolving their architecture so that they are more, I guess, symbiotic rather than retrofit.
And that's exactly the type of feedback that I'm getting from technology leaders in the accounting space. And certainly from a strategy perspective, I think a lot of us, the players in the space, are thinking about the evolution of this, starting off with easy and then figuring out more native integrations with like broader AI multi-use capabilities. And I think there's so much that you can do with it. And from an executive position at Gapify, just entertaining the different possibilities is fun. But at the end of all the exciting things that you can think about and what you can do with AI, you still have to focus on some kind of reasonable strategy to get this product and technology to the market. course, as we know, easier said than done. But I think one approach to really getting this process going for the market is just identifying use cases that that matter and where AI can help right away. So to segue to my next question, Jason, like what are some of the common use cases that you're seeing in AI, whether it's machine learning oriented or Gen AI oriented?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think that I agree with you. I think to practically apply it, you need to find a practical use case. It doesn't have to be an earth-shattering use case. Part of this technology, specifically generative AI, but it's also true to a degree with machine learning, is through the exercise of using it in a practical, even if it's a small use case, you learn a lot more about the technology. And I do believe that by using it, you'll see more of the art of the possible. So I think what we're encouraging a lot of people as they go down this journey, I think the typical methodology for exploring new technology is what's the big ROI? And not to say that you should ignore ROI, but we are suggesting that you adjust your lens a little bit because this technology is so new and used in different ways. Part of the figuring out this bigger ROI is learning the today. So find a small use case and learn it. It's more of an exploration exercise than necessarily the big ROI. The ROI will then come later. But in terms of use cases, generative AI, let's start there. That's a super exciting space. It gives us basically technology that's able to deal with unstructured data. And that's the example of I get about a lot of information and I get a succinct or synthesized piece of information. Common use case, contract reviews is probably one of the most popular use cases we're seeing. Finance and accounting teams spend so much time reading documents, whether it's revenue contracts, lease contracts, equity contracts. Purchasing contracts. There's so much information in these things that teams have to go through. And the reality is you're sifting through what is probably 95% legal mumbo jumbo, apologies, lawyers out there, and 5% accounting relevant information. But I still have to read 25 pages to make sure something isn't buried in there. The ability of generative AI to read the contract and then extract the succinct piece of information is super, super helpful. And you can do, sometimes there is a basic technologies, some of the chat technologies can do that for you, but there are tools that are being trained that do a better job of extracting that information. So that's a really interesting use case. That's kind of that extraction and summarization capabilities are super helpful. The other common use case is a methodology of comparing. So as opposed to in the contract methodology, you're taking one document and you're extracting information. Another common use case, which is around the order management space. In order management, you have multiple systems, whether it's NetSuite and Salesforce. You will likely have some sort of contract with the customer. If there's an implementation, there's an SOW. There might be a purchase order coming from the customer. I've got an order and I've got a quote in my systems. And part of the exercise is you close the deal. You're ready to fulfill the order, bill the customer. Are we all in sync? Because all those documents have a tendency to drift apart. So that's where AI can read your order, read your quote, read the contract, read the purchase order from the customer, and make sure that the data is in sync. It can even read the data within the systems, the order within maybe NetSuite and the quote within Salesforce, and do those comparisons. Because of the generative AI language model capability, in other words, it's able to understand plain English language, it's able to connect the dots and do a much more effective comparison, even if the words are not identical. And that's where it's really powerful. So order management, but invoice to PO comparisons is another good example there, right? So what we're seeing is that methodology of data extraction, very, very powerful. Some degree potentially of interpretation. Hey, I might have a term that is defined differently, so there's a component of interpretation, and that comparisons are very, very powerful in the generative AI space. If you flip over to the machine learning side of the house, there we're talking about typically you wanting to use larger data sets. It doesn't have to be millions and millions of records, but you're certainly talking about thousands of records because you're asking this engine to effectively predict an outcome or to identify a pattern in the data. And therefore, there needs to be enough of a population to do that. Otherwise, it's guessing. But use cases there could be, you mentioned the fraud one. And that fraud you describe as credit card, but there's often cases where you can look for internal fraud, where that's examining how sales contracts have been defined and pricing has been defined. It could be looking for anomalies or errors in the data. We have a lot of our clients have enormous volumes of transactions. They're direct-to-consumer customers. They're direct-to-consumer businesses. Ingesting lots of information from lots of different sources and have to organize, aggregate, validate, and then post that. Very, very difficult for a human to identify those types of errors in the data. So you can use machine learning to look at many, many different data sets and many different data fields to identify, hey, that tax rate that we charge appears to be incorrect based on the product and the customer and the date and the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it can be a really good way to identify potential anomalies in the data. So there are many, many use cases. I think the other one that we're seeing a lot with machine learning is more of a forward-looking, growth-oriented one, which how do I use my customer data, maybe in Salesforce as a CRM, that I can predict potential behaviors. I mentioned before, upselling opportunities, cross-selling opportunities, but also churn risks, opportunity prioritization, pricing recommendations. So there's lots of really interesting ways to use machine learning to really, I guess, enhance the analytics that humans will do, or frankly, significantly improve it, because as humans, we're not necessarily as good at looking across an enormous data set and identifying all the patterns that are hidden in the data. So,
Wow.
There you go.
Those are three really good ones. And as you describe them, Jason, to me, knowing these processes in accounting very well, whether it's order to cash, record to report, P2P, you think about all these cycles, the forms that you just described, there's an application for the use cases that you mentioned for everyone in accounting. Yeah. So I'm sounding like an AI salesman now, and I don't. The thing, it is true. And first of all, I'll give a unofficial plug to our friends at Clarity, who do what you described really well on the Gen AI order to cash side, taking revenue contracts, extracting data, organizing it, and teeing up your revenue memos, and being able to detect certain call outs in these contracts, and then letting that go through the standard workflows for creating transactions. I think it's just incredible that folks like Clarity have done an amazing job applying that to real use cases today. And it's proof that this technology is very viable already in its current form now. And when you talk about on the machine learning side, detecting anomalies, I mentioned the fraud example, but I've seen in the past, and I know there are some early players in this space already, expense report anomalies. Mm-hmm. That's a really good use case for that as well. I know our friends at Flowcast, has also various analysis, some level of analytics embedded into their technology today. And Blackline recently announced its journal entry, risk analyzer as something in the roadmap. There's a press release on that. So you look up and down the stream of different accounting cycles. It's an exciting world out there, Jason. I
100% agree. It's amazing. I think that's why part of this is you need to start going down this journey, because if you don't learn the technology, you don't understand its application. I think people don't realize that, Blackline launches that there's machine learning embedded in the background. If it can do that, imagine the other places that you can apply it. So I agree. I think there are use cases for everybody. As say, you don't necessarily need to be seeking the silver bullet. Find the use case, a practical one, a real world one for your place, and then play with it, learn, see what it does well, see what it doesn't. The reality is this is also, especially Gento, as is a new technology. Some of the stuff it does is just mind-boggling and on their success side. And other times it's a bit mind-boggling of why is this not working? But you need to understand that. So I must come across as a salesperson as well for AI. But I really believe it's game-changing in taking that automation to the next level. It's not about replacing the existing technology, as many of the products will embed it in it. It's about supplementing. It's about doing so much more with automation that can free up a lot of time. Because we keep hearing, it's going to take our jobs. It's going to take. I just don't see it. Not at least for the very long foreseeable future. There's such a need in finance and accounting from a resource standpoint. We need these technologies to drive efficiencies, to allow us to focus in the spaces that we need to be, to eliminate a lot of this manual stuff that we do, as well as, which is oftentimes very error prone. It's actually quite staggering how much, when you really look at most finance and accounting, how much error prone processes they operate.
Absolutely. And I know you and I spend a lot of time talking to leaders in the accounting community, and overwhelmingly, everyone's perspectives on AI is, gosh, we could use a lot of that help right now versus, oh no, this is, going to take away our jobs. And I think, in accounting, we've just been so underserved in terms of technology. Here comes AI, a way for us to make meaningful improvements to our processes. And to your point, be more accurate and, our jobs are also compliance oriented. So, we have to make sure things get done properly. This is a tool that can help us do that. So it's really exciting to me to see how much this is developed. And, this is also a big reason why Gapify is making investments in the area ourselves. Now, Jason, I would not be a good accountant if I didn't ask you about concerns and risks around this technology. So as you wrap up the podcast, I wanted to get your thoughts on just some common concerns that you're hearing in the market about adopting AI, and maybe dispel some of the common myths that you're hearing out there.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of the most common concerns, one obviously is confidentiality and security. I think people are very worried, and there's been a lot of discussion and news publications about what happens to my data, who will have access to the data, is it using the data, are others going to be able to use my data, is it using my data to train the model so that others get better results, and therefore as a result I'm effectively giving away proprietary information or IP. That is a real concern. But the reality on the flip side of that is applications, whether standalone or embedded, have created methodology by which you can still get all the benefits and capabilities of AI in a secure environment. You need to make sure you understand that. So it's both a truth and a bit of a myth. That's anything AI, it's all going to be lost. That's not really true. It is just a really important question to ask, is how do I know that my data is secure, not being shared, not available to others, and it's maintained in that kind of proprietary environment? The second one is, which comes up over and over again, is that the concept of hallucinations or the AI making errors, especially generative AI. Machine learning typically it doesn't per se make errors because machine learning is typically predicting an outcome. There is an expectation of some false positives or false negatives. In other words, it says something will happen and it doesn't, or it doesn't say something will happen and it does. But similarly with generative AI, because it's effectively a statistical model and it will give a slightly different response every time, it is very possible that you will get some degree of mistakes. So that is a real concern. You need to be aware of it. And I think what's really important is how do you wrap your risk tolerance around it? In other words, if I'm doing revenue recognition and I'm identifying complex rev rec terms in a revenue contract, you probably want to make sure that your internal level of diligence is higher and trust in the system is lower. It's not to say that it's not going to produce correct stuff, but the impact of that error is very high. You flip to the other side, you're processing AP invoices, you get a large volume of small value invoices. It's probably not the end of the world if a couple of them get misclassified, in which case you can lower your level of diligence and kind of raise your level of, I guess, risk tolerance around those things. But it's really important to understand where are the risk points in your process where hallucinations or errors by the AI can have a significant impact, and then you need to focus your time and attention there. I think the beauty of AI is to eliminate the need for much of the stuff to be checked and double-checked and triple-checked, which we oftentimes have to do with manual processes today. But you shouldn't assume that it's right. The more judgmental, the more room there is for both humans and AI to make mistakes. So make sure you vet them more. The more, call it prescriptive, the less likely AI will make errors. And therefore you can lower your levels of diligence to get more comfortable. But those are probably the two main ones. There's a variety of other ones out there in terms of how does it integrate and, what does it do to my organization and training and retraining. And there's certainly a valid list, but those are probably still the two that I think are acting as primary roadblocks, folks. We've seen companies say no AI because they haven't got themselves comfortable about the security, confidentiality, and how do we deal with those control considerations.
Yeah, and I think you hit on two very key concerns that I'm hearing in the market. Privacy, just not knowing to the extent that data that you are leveraging to power this AI and where that's going and how it's being used. There's good reasons why people are concerned about that. So glad you flagged that, because I think that is fundamental to getting wider adoption of AI in the accounting space. And then, especially for customers of Gapify who are publicly traded, and even, beyond that, compliance and risk-based approach. And this is part of our, fabric as accountants, right? We take a risk-based approach to determining materiality and determining which transactions to spend more time on and be more diligent about. I think teams not taking a risk-oriented approach to adopting AI is a risk. And so I know that's a typical concern as well. You mentioned controls, and I think there are definitely things that can be done by the organization and even software providers like us. I think that's a good topic for our third episode. But I think this was very enlightening, Jason. I think just drilling down and knowing the different forms of AI, hearing about the use cases, getting excited about what it can do for our team, our accounting teams out there. Really enjoyed having you back for the second episode. And of course, there's more fun on the third as we get into details about compliance and some of those other topics such as internal controls. So thanks for coming on today, Jason.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me again. I look forward to our next session.
Thanks for stopping by. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you want more information, please check us out at gapify.com, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.